What's up, everybody? Welcome back. Did y'all see that? What?
Let's just throw Scream 6 in there for like
It was good.
movie. It was really good. The best of the franchise, in my opinion, since the first one.
Yeah.
Steven Bernstein, welcome inside the crazy ant farm. How are you?
I'm good. How are you both?
Oh, living the dream as always, and we are super pumped to talk to you and excited. Thank you so much for taking time to speak with us.
My great pleasure.
Yeah. So, how we like to start this thing off, because anybody who might not be familiar with your work, although I find that hard to believe with the credits, and we're going to dive into that. But for anybody out there, maybe, we like to kind of dive in. We're always interested because everybody's backstory is kind of different. So we need to know, why are you in the industry? Was it something that you always wanted to do? Did you know from an early age? Did you kind of fall into it? How'd you get started, and why cinematography to start off with?
You know, I wanted to be a writer very early on. I was writing when I was still in my teens. Teenage angst, a lot of self-indulgent, tragically poetry. I hope no one ever finds it wherever it may be. It's probably the bottom of a drawer somewhere. And then little plays and that sort of thing, but no specific dream to get into film. And then read philosophy at university for whatever reasons. Still writing a lot, and then went to work at the BBC. Oddly, they got recruited by them and was in a training program for writer directors that led to doing some theater in the UK as well. But then the big phenomena that occurred was that there was a guy going around London and had this idea that the best way for bands to get to A&R men, and A&R men was people who determined whether you got into the music business or not,
Right.
was to get to the door, show them videos, because there was these things called 3/4 inch video, these great big videotapes, these big
Yes.
machines that clunked and these awful cameras. But if
That's
you
right.
recorded them on 3/4 inch video, then they wouldn't have to get through the door. You just have a pile of videos inside the A&R man's office. He would look at the video and say, I want to sign this band. And I had access to some equipment from the BBC, which I would borrow. I would always return on Mondays. And we would always. I think most of it is back by now. It's been 40 years. So, I hope there's just statute of limitations. And we showed them the bands. Then John Roseman guys said, well, why don't we expand these videos? Why don't we make them more complicated? So why don't we tell little stories that the band's willing to pay rather than 100 quid, 200 quid? And we expanded and expanded. And then suddenly there was the music video phenomena in the UK, and there was Duran, and there was Tears for Fears, and there was the Eurythmics, and there was Paul McCartney, and there was Rick Jagger. And everybody was doing videos, and budgets were getting bigger and bigger. As you guys probably know, by the time they shot Girls on Film as £1 million budget, which is equivalent about $4 million now for a music video.
Yeah.
So, and it was mainly in the UK. MTV actually came later. The important thing is that after a very formal training in writing style and directing and how to deal with actors, you then get to go the anarchic world of music videos where you can do absolutely anything. And that idea of doing absolutely anything is essential to my philosophy and the way I approach my art and my craft, is that whatever you are experimenting, whatever you're experimenting, you discover something about yourself, something about your story, something about your characters, and you've got to get out of that regimentation and get into the craziness of your subconscious, of the chaos of the world. And that's what music videos did. I famously shot a music video entirely out of focus, intentionally, from beginning to end.
Nice.
Because we thought the audience would lean in and want to see the artist. We'd only occasionally roll for focus, but mostly out of focus. When the record company first saw it, silence in the room. Like wonderful scene in The Apprenticeship of Duddy Kravitz, if you've ever seen that movie, where they show this awful video, and you see the reaction shot of the audience with their mouths hanging. It was that sort of Duddy Kravitz moment. And then I went on to win all these awards. And then my poor focus puller rang me years later, and very depressed because I hadn't seen him for because he was so busy. And he goes, yeah, that got me a lot of work. I said, you should be happy. He goes, yeah, I got a lot of work. There's the focus puller who never shoots anything in focus. Because everyone wanted that non-focus look. And I said, it wasn't that hard. He said, but they didn't know it. So that was, but the wild experimentation with colors, with wet downs, with a backlight, with blue light. We used to have these things called party colors, where you would never use them on a traditional drama, cobalt blue and burnt orange and all the rest of it. But on music videos, we would try anything.
Yeah.
And by doing that, we then discovered, hey, you do a wet down, and then you do a cobalt blue backlight on the wet ground, and it kind of shimmers in this strange blue green color, and then you put a warm light on the skin tones. It looks magnificent, and that engendered a whole bunch of new looks in theatrical feature films. I don't think Blade Runner would have been Blade Runner if there hadn't been music videos around for a while. I don't think a lot of the contemporary cinematography that occurred would have occurred had it not been for music videos. And then I think the whole formal experimentations in terms of storytelling also altered because of music videos. About that time, I worked with a guy named Tony Kaye, who was a wild man.
Yeah.
And Tony would do anything. And the minute we get on the set, Tony would pick the camera up and start filming before we even had lit it. And he would be shooting through people's legs. He'd be turning the cameras upside down. He would order every single filter that was available, stick them on, see what would happen. And what I learned from Tony was, again, this idea of wild experimentation, that creative process is about the discovery of the idea rather than the reporting of an idea. And so many writers could learn from that. But that's what I learned then, and that later affected my directing and my writing and everything else. I spent a lot of time at the beginning of my career. We'll get to the rest later.
Wow, that I just so much to unpack there. I know, Logan, you're ready to jump. I
Oh,
saw your
for
eyes
sure.
when he started talking about lighting and the little you were like, whoop.
It is very exciting because, I always attribute the falling in love with storytelling to, we come from a broadcast journalism background. So I always attribute it to that. But I mean, even before that, watching films like Sleepers of the Dark Knight and Stand By Me, films that I really encapsulated the story and what the characters meant and what the journey was that they were going on. But even before that, you're kind of making me realize that I fell in love with storytelling way before that, when I would wake up early mornings before school and watch MTV or VH1 and fall in love with like Aerosmith, Janie's Got a Gun, or like Under the Bridge, Red Hot Chili Peppers, or all of these different type of music videos. And not a lot of people even realize that filmmakers start off in music videos a lot of the time. Like,
Yeah,
for example, Martin Scorsese doing Bad, I believe,
yeah.
with Michael Jackson. So, I mean, it's a whole bunch of different avenues that you can take to break into the entertainment industry,
Oh,
because
sure.
this podcast is for up and comers trying to break into the entertainment industry. We love to have conversations with industry professionals like yourself, Steven, to where they can, figure out their own steps and their own journey on how to move forward and take that first step. So I mean, I'm a camera guy myself. I love cinematography. We're actually filmmakers ourselves, and I'm about to DP our next film. Super excited about it. Be my first ever time DPing a film. What advice would you give to a first-time director of photography stepping on set for the first time to be behind the camera and kind of take control of the atmosphere?
Check the gate. No.
Yeah, we were talking about that. Here's the crazy thing. We use story all the time in film,
Mm-hmm.
and we call ourselves storyteller. But for cinematographer and for directors and even for writers,
Mm-hmm.
it's important to embrace this idea that cinema is an experience rather than storytelling. We
Yes.
use storytelling, but we use storytelling in the service of something else, which to my mind is the discovery of character. And we can discover character in all sorts of ways. And I like to break our cinematic world into two parts: the sort of frontal cortex, logical, narrative section, and then the visceral section, when we simply experience it physically, like in our hearts and in our guts. When you see a
Right.
film like Days of Heaven and that opening trestle shot in Days of Heaven, you feel emotionally overwhelmed, not because of any story thing that's happening, not because you're learning anything, not for any revelation or any setup or any introduction of an idea, simply because it affects you. When you look at a Rothko painting, you're affected
Yeah.
emotionally without there being any narrative. When you hear some atonal music or some rock music for that matter, or classical music, there isn't necessarily a narrative. People say, oh, there's always a narrative. I imagine there's a fawn in a field when I hear that music. Okay, dude, you're imposing that on that experience.
That's right.
Visceral is visceral. So the first thing I would say to any cinematographer is, you may be telling a story. In that case, where the camera is and the eye line, all that sort of stuff is certainly important. But remember also that you're making an audience feel something. And if you make an audience feel something, Do that with lighting. If you backlight
Yes.
someone, the audience is going to feel entirely different than if you front light them. If you light them with a warm light, it's going to be different than a blue light. If you push the camera in slowly, the audience won't even notice the push in, but they'll feel, not think,
That's right.
not storytelling, but they'll feel that something significant is happening at that moment. If you put the camera on your shoulder and bounce it around, people say, well, that's clearly point of view when that happens. Tell you something. It's simply a agreed upon code of point of view because when you're running and you're excited or you're nearly in a car accident or more, the world isn't bouncing around. The eye stabilizes the world.
That's
But
right.
we've seen so much news footage of cameras bouncing around in war zones that we think, oh, that's what point of view looks like. So what you're doing is you're encoding an idea at the audience. So what I do is I break down things down as a director into 7 or 8 columns, and I say what my intention is for the audience in an individual scene. And then I think, how am I going to use composition to create that feeling, number one, and the idea in the audience? Then I'm looking at lighting. How am I going to do that with lighting? Then I'm looking at the editing. Then I'm looking at movement and all these different things I combine and orchestrate so that production design, editing, and for the DP, camera movement, the lens choice, the filter choice, all these things in the service of ideas and story, but also of feeling. When I
Mm,
shot Monster, shooting with one of the most beautiful people on the planet, Charlize Theron.
yeah.
But she and I and Patty Jenkins agreed that we didn't want her to be beautiful. We wanted to show an individual and a world in decay. So, what do I associate with decay viscerally? Greens and
Yes.
browns and
Yes.
blues, things that are rotting. So, I did a lot of that. Not pure light, but dappled light. Very often you see things through trees or wreckage or whatever, creating lots of shadows. So I did that. Fluorescence. For some reason, in low income restaurants and bars, a lot of fluorescence, but not the right kind of fluorescence, fluorescence of different color temperatures. So I mixed in fluorescence of different color temperatures. I actually had some little blinking going on. I had those blues and greens I talked
That's
about.
right.
I had harsh side lighting. And she didn't wear makeup. I became famous because I made one of the most beautiful women in the world look really terrible, for which she's always thanked me.
That's
So,
right.
the difficulty for cinematographer, particularly for young people, is we always think we've got to make our reel. We're trying to impress people, so they hire us because we're all out there fighting to get jobs, and we want to do something beautiful to show our skill set. You don't want to do something beautiful. You want to do something appropriate.
Yes. There's so much there. First of all, I love that you bring up things that we don't hear about often enough in the industry, and I think it's important because as a director, you hear a lot of people say they want to be a director, they want to do this, they want to do that, without really any knowledge of how to do that or what it means to do that. It's one thing to just put up the camera, say action, and watch the actors do the dialogue, right? It's another thing, like you said, to capture the feeling. What if they're not saying anything? How are you telling the audience something? And I go back, and anytime we talk to young people or young people ask, I always bring up 12 Angry Men. I think it's a great example of how subtle camera movement makes you feel the tension that's building in the room as they continue to argue, and you don't even realize it's happening, right? You're going from these wide establishing shots at the beginning of the movie, and as it just continues to close in on you, and you don't even know it's happening. And I think that's a great example. They did it again in the newer version of 310 to Yuma, that scene in the hotel room where it's just kind
Yep.
of like, but it's little things like that. And then, of course, the lighting, like you said, it makes such a drastic difference in how even a performance looks. They could be nailing the performance, like the best acting you've ever seen still doesn't come off right when you're looking at it back in post because you're not feeling the emotion that they're emitting. And I love that you brought that up because I think it's not given the attention that it really deserves to
Or
be given.
or you look at a film like Days of Heaven,
Yeah,
where there's basically no dialogue,
exactly.
and yet you feel, as I mentioned before, like the trestle sequence, but even later when she's falling in love with the farmer, it's all done with composition, all
Yes.
done with lighting. And the great thing about cinematography and music is the enigmatic quality,
Mm,
in that it's more like the way we experience the world. 12 Minutes is a great example of a virtually perfect narrative, came from a stage play originally. So everything's conveyed by dialogue, although the cinematography, as you rightly say, is very, very good. But Days of Heaven is kind of the dialectic opposite of that, and it doesn't rely on the specificity of language. It requires on the enigma of image and is equally compelling, but it's two virtues that are related to each other in the same art form. And as a cinematographer director, you want to draw on both those things. John Frankenheimer in films like Seconds and so on. You look at the use of extreme wide angle lenses. And
Yeah.
a simple choice, nothing to do with performance, nothing to do with narrative, nothing in the script that would suggest those things. But because of the distortion of the wide angle and the camera being very, very close, you feel that you're in this living nightmare, which is absolutely fascinating. You look at the films of Fassbinder and how he composes people with frames within frames to give a sense of claustrophobia. These are all the things that, and by the way, congratulations on your upcoming pictures,
Oh,
Logan. Well done.
thank you.
Thank you.
But it's a big deal to examine these ideas and say, as I used to say as a cinematographer, I still say as a director, let's forget about the script and see how I can create these enigmatic emotional responses entirely with lighting, camera, composition, filters. And then I say, how can I do the same thing with music? And then I say, how can I do the same thing with editing? And then I finally go back to narrative because narrative is the default mode that we all go to. And yet exposition is the enemy of good filmmaking. So if you start in the default mode with too much exposition, you're going to subvert all these other powerful elements, which aren't storytelling, but are still part of the filmmaking experience. So we're storytellers, but we're also filmmakers, and we have to be both to be great.
Oh, most definitely,
Yeah.
because I try to have a lot of conversations. We bring interns into the company who, they're very vanilla, I guess you could say, very tan, trying just getting their feet wet, trying to find the first step to take moving forward, chasing their dream. So we try to always give the piece of advice to be not afraid to try things. Don't be
Yeah.
afraid to shoot in between the legs. Don't be afraid to shoot something out of focus and then roll into focus. It's all about having that confidence and that ability to be able to create something that may or may not be different or may pay homage to something that you have seen before in your filmmaking cinephile career that you want to,
Brilliant.
replicate in your art. And I mean, that's the most beautiful thing too. I mean, replication of past art that you have seen before, putting it into your film, like what Dustin said with what we did in our first film, Deadlines, we used a lot of the same techniques that was in 12 Angry Men.
Yeah.
So it is a beautiful experience to be able to
It
pass
is.
along that journey and that knowledge and that, I guess, expertise to the up and comers trying to
Yeah,
break into it.
you've got to look at how other people utilize the language. I would say
Yes.
this also in my writing. The thing that liberated me and prevented me from having writer's block. I have terrible writer's block. I couldn't write because I was so anxious about writing in the three acts and making sure things
Yep.
would land at a particular time. And I discovered slop writing was completely liberating, which saying in your I learned from Joan Didion, not
Mm-hmm.
directly, but indirectly. She said she writes to discover what she thinks,
Mm.
which is such an important thing. And then
Mm-hmm.
I began to see that writing was a journey of discovery, not of reportage, not of explanation. So I did start with an outline. I now believe that outlines are the enemy of the devil, or is the device of the devil, the mechanism of the devil. That people send us outlines to stop us from thinking. Because if we try to determine before we make a film, before we direct a film, before we write it, where we're going, then we're only thinking about narrative. Whereas if we write, and the way I write, I dictate on this little recorder, this digital recorder. I walk and talk. I have no plan, no outline, no intention, no idea of what I'm going to write about, and I just write. And I wrote my last screenplay in 2.5 days, almost 3 days. I was going slow. I stopped for lunch, and I wrote a terrible 180-page screenplay. But in going back and reading that screenplay, I discovered a complexity and nuance in characters that never would have been realized had I started with an outline. So
Right.
then I rewrote and rewrote and rewrote again, understanding that all artistic process is a journey of discovery. That first you do, and then you examine what you've done, and then you recreate, I think is hugely liberating. So when I wrote the book, which we'll talk about later, I wrote that in a day and a half, dictating as fast as I could, and it was absolutely diabolically shite. It was terrible. But then in examining it, I discovered a voice within me that I didn't know I had. I don't want to become spiritual and say it's a channeling, but it is a kind of channeling because the way our mind works is we accumulate more data than we organize.
Right.
And the process of organization is the process of diminishing. If you over-organize, you're not accessing all the ideas that are potentially there.
That's right.
The most interesting characters are the most complex characters. If you begin with an outline, you tend to simplify your characters to fit them into an outline. Whereas if you write before you have an outline, suddenly your characters have many different predispositions, many different obsessions, many inconsistencies,
Yeah.
life traumas, backstories, all these things mixed together. And suddenly what we see on the page is a fully realized human being, not a character in the service of a savior cat 3-act drama, which ultimately is better. If you apply that to cinematography as well, I began lighting everything from below just because. I shot things out of focus just because. As you experiment, you discover, and I think that experimentation is essential to creative process.
Well, it's the word that keeps springing to me right now with everything that you're saying is authenticity. And I like that a journey of discovery, that you're approaching everything, your writing, your cinematography, your directing as discovery. Because the reason I come to authenticity is because we don't have an outline for life. We don't wake up and know what's going to happen today because it's been planned out. It just, whatever is going to happen today happens today, and we have to deal with it. That's authentic. So why would you do anything different when you're trying to tell your story on film, right? If you outline the whole thing, that's not how real life works. And the whole point is to connect to the audience on a level that they understand. And I think the trap that many filmmakers fall into when they do the outline, and like you said, they go in and they try to simplify this or give an explanation there, then you find yourself falling into the trap of dumbing it down for the audience. And now you've lost the audience, right? I hate a film that's telling me what I should feel or telling me what I should think. I just want to experience it. Like you, so
you nailed it. You nailed it. I've got a line that I say: all films are mysteries.
Yes.
Comedies,
Yes.
even white chicks, it's a mystery. Monster is a mystery. But it's the mystery of character. The
Yes.
thing that we as people collectively are most interested in is other people, and we can't figure other people out. When we first start dating someone, we're trying to figure them out.
That's
when we go
right.
into a business situation, when we meet our crew, when we meet actors, you're talking about our beloved Spencer Garrett before. When you meet these people, you meet anyone interesting and compelling, you try to figure them out. And we don't do that enough in cinema. If
That's
your
right.
film opens with complex characters who are full of inconsistent behavior, what does the audience do? We're pattern-seeking creatures, we audiences, and we try to figure that person out.
That's
and you've
right.
got them in the palm of your hand, because then what you choose to reveal or not reveal means they'll watch the rest of your movie. You want complexity, and that's a friend of mine, Jon Favreau, dropping names, but when he directed Iron Man, he did a sequence with Robert Downey at the beginning of that film where Robert does this long, complex, improvised discourse where we see a vulnerable and complex person. That is what created the franchise, believe it or not.
Oh, without doubt.
We then saw a person rather than a superhero.
Yes, and it's the reason he fought so hard to cast him. The studio was like, no way, this guy's, he's all kinds of trouble. And Jon Favreau's like, exactly, he's all kinds of trouble. We don't know what we're going to get from him. And that is Tony Stark. Like, we don't know what we're going to get from him. And so I love that you brought that up. Okay, before we dive in, because I know Logan is ready and I'm ready, and we want to talk about the book and we want to talk about the new movie. But hearing you break down Monster, I have to ask, how do you, I want to know the process for the Waterboy, because wow, two totally drastic situations there. How did that, because that was the most beautiful breakdown, detailed explanation of Monster that I just think that is like a masterclass in cinematography. So you do that and then you go, yeah, the Waterboy. What's the approach there?
First of all, I got to give you your flowers, because most people go to white chicks, and white chicks. Well, thank you for pulling in, Waterboy.
I'm a Louisiana boy, Bobby Boucher. You know, we got to do it.
Here's the trick to cinematography: you got to take every job seriously. And Adam Sandler is one of the most decent, loving, kind, generous people there is on the planet, and a delight to work with. But we cared about how that film worked. And we were getting notes sometimes from people in the studio, not all the people. We had some great producers as well. But we get the notes saying, hey, don't spend a lot of time on the sequence like the football sequence. It doesn't matter. It's all about Adam. We didn't believe that. We believed that the football had to work at some level. And
Mm-hmm.
even though it was very broad and the film is in many respects farcical, if you didn't believe that the football game was actually happening and there could be a winner or a loser, the thing wouldn't work. So we brought in some great stunt people, some football experts as consultants. And we made sure when we were shooting the second unit on that film that all the football worked. The performance, Kathy Bates, I worked with on two films, and I love Kathy and a great actress. Uh, sure, the performance is comic, but it's genuine. You
Yeah.
believe there really was this dynamic between, and I'll defend this the day I die, what anyone says, between Adam and Kathy,
Yeah.
and that she really did love him and she really was overprotective. And then
Hmm.
when she has the denouement, spoiler alert, she changes at the end of the film and gets in that airboat and goes takes him to the football game. You believe that arc. So
Yes.
remember that the difference between comedy and farce is that farce tells us that this isn't from the real world and nothing matters. And farce generally doesn't work for that long and certainly doesn't stay with you. The comedy is based on the real human experience.
Yep.
So you've got to get just enough of the human experience. And I thought Adam's performance was kind of good. And
Yeah.
I think you believed that he existed. And, Farousa as the girlfriend, you kind of believed. And the football coach, you kind of believed. And Henry Winkler was great. And you believed it just enough that you saw enough of humanity that the thing worked. So when I was shooting the interior scenes inside their house with Kathy, I lit it like a feature film, like a real, genuine drama.
Hmm.
When I shot the scene outside the hospital, where everyone came with the torches, we used real torchlight to illuminate them with, and we got real Moscow lights in, and that could have been SWAT. That could have been, Wesley Snipes' picture, Blade or British
Yep.
Sunshine did with Wesley, but it happened to be a comedy. But it was a comedy you looked at, and it never looked chintzy or cheap
Yeah.
or anything but genuine. It looked like a great big movie, and I think that serves the comedy. Take everything seriously, even when it's comic.
Love
Oh,
it. Love
so
it.
good. That just made my day. That whole passage, that was great. Anyway, now it is time. Of course, we want to talk about your news story, GRQ. Man, oh man, if you would love to humor us real quick, what would you say would be your minute elevator pitch for this story?
It's a guy who lies to his wife, always a bad idea, and says everything's fine financially. He's about to get his house repossessed. So he's got 7 hours to raise the money to save his home and thinks it's a good idea to invest everything in crypto
Oh.
and borrows money from everybody he knows and makes a crypto play. And it doesn't work out quite as he hoped, although it goes through a lot of adventures on the way. Meanwhile, there's a series of catastrophic earthquakes that are wiping out Los Angeles while all this is going on, and that's our narrative.
Wow, wow, that sounds intense, and it's a
It
comedy,
does.
right?
It's
Because of
uh,
course
it's
it is,
mainly
right?
it's mainly a comedy. It's a comedy again of human behavior.
Yep.
It's
Yes.
a lot of people see it as a thriller. It's got a lot of thrilling elements because there's this ticking clock.
Hmm.
But he goes to such desperate measures that again, with the foundation in humanity, we can see the worst parts of ourselves in this character. When he's speaking to a mortgage company, mortgage guy being played by Spencer Garrett, among others, and begging them for more time. And they say, look, we've been trying to reach you for 18 months to get a single payment. And he goes, are you sure? What email was it going to?
Yeah.
I mean, which of us haven't done that when we're in a bit
No,
of trouble? Like, by the
absolutely.
we didn't get the message, 18 months. So that's kind of a balance. When he's talking to his wife, she goes, are you sure you're telling me the truth? He goes, absolutely, I'm telling the truth. It's and meanwhile the clock is ticking. And oddly, like a Hitchcock film, even this guy is lying to everybody. You're rooting for him because
Sure.
this tsunami is heading towards him, and these earthquakes are occurring. He's in a basement for part of the film. The roof is literally collapsed. His world is collapsing around him, and he's desperate to raise this money. And of course, I spent so much time researching the crypto world, which I am now absolutely terrified of.
I'm
I
sure.
had so one of the biggest players in crypto. I said, so hang on, I don't understand. What's this all based on? These prices going up and down? And he said, nothing.
Yeah, yeah, that's terrifying right there. Like, yeah,
So,
Yeah.
so, so he's got all his fortune in crypto, and it's going up, it's going down. The earthquake, and then of course there's this terrible character that's introduced in the movie. He's about to do a movie about crypto, and the character's name
Mm,
is Steven Bernstein.
ah,
And
yeah, okay,
Steven Bernstein is about to announce he's going to do a film called GRQ inside the movie GRQ. And if when his film comes out, everyone's presuming the price will go up because he's making a movie about crypto. But then Steven Bernstein's being interviewed, and he
Hmm.
says that crypto is based on nothing, and the price crashes down. So it's a wild, surreal,
Wow.
meta adventure in which I appear, but someone else, another actor, plays me. I appear as another character.
That's where does an idea like this come from? Was this you're dictating something else and it just hits, or like, because that's a pretty cool idea. It's
That is.
original. It's like it's definitely going to be a character study. So where does that come from? How does that spawn in the back of your brain?
Journey of discovery. If I had written that as an outline, it wouldn't have happened.
That see,
I
yeah,
was when I was walking around in Ojai up in the mountains. I had my little dictation device, and I began talking. The more I talked, the more bored I got, and I was doing dialogue. And then I said, "Oh, what if I appear in my own novel?" So
right.
then Steve Bernstein appeared in my novel, and I said, I don't like Steve Bernstein that much. What if I have somebody criticizing Steve Bernstein? And that person appeared, and then I thought my wife had just been yelling at me about how because the pandemic just happened. She wasn't happy with the amount of savings we had, quite rightly, and I'm scared of her because she's so much smarter than I am. So occasionally I'd waffle a little bit, not exactly give her all the information that I might have given her because, hey, she would just worry. Not the most mature, adult, or ethical thing for me to do. And then I thought about my feelings. I said, hey, what if I have the character being me for a while and lying to his wife? What if he lied way worse than I've ever lied to my wife? And what if I just kept going down that road? This is the exciting thing about just what I call embracing the chaos.
Yeah.
Just run with it and see where it goes. And then suddenly, magically, something then fell on me. And then I wrote the story of the film. Then I wrote the novel.
Hmm.
Then we made the film. Then a publisher phoned me who would my agent had sent the novel and said, "This is brilliant. We want to publish this." And then, but could you? And I had seen the film. Could you incorporate some of the film in the novel? So then the film then appears in the novel, and meta upon meta, out comes the book, and crazy good. I mean, crazy good reviews. I mean, Amazon's like, what is it, like all fives or something mad
Yes.
like that?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
it's nuts. And then it's won this Literary Titan Award in the first month the book's out. I'm a filmmaker. I don't think of myself as a novelist. Suddenly, a novelist is the most successful thing I've ever done. Is just going gangbusters. And then the film gets released next year. It's been a great and wild adventure. It's great when you have a philosophy. It's even
Hmm.
better when your philosophy turns out to work because
Yeah.
this could have easily failed, and I could have written the worst book and the worst film of all time. But somehow it works. So maybe the system does work. I don't know. We'll find out.
I love that. And as someone who, you are so good at showing humans in humanity states, right? I mean, you go to drug dealers and half baked, you go to somebody who's afraid to get married in the wood, you go to all of these different human experiments, human situations that I feel like anyone could be plopped into those situations and have that connectability. Do you feel like the humanity aspect is something that draws you to every
Yeah.
project that you either write or get attached to?
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, that's what I'm drawn to, and that's the
Hmm.
directors I was drawn to. I mean, I did 3 films with Noah Baumbach. We were very, very close, still are close, and
Yeah.
and uh, Noah is all about the observation of eccentric behavior.
Hmm.
We love people not despite their strange and aberrant behavior, but because of it. If you
Mm.
have a pet and you look at your golden doodle or whatever you've got, you don't think, "Wow, what a competent a mammal." When they roll over and do something crazy, they jump in
Right.
the mud, they bite their own tail when they're a puppy. You don't love them less, you love them more.
Yeah.
That's significant. And when we see people being self destructive in kind of a loving way, when we see people making bad decisions, all those guys in Half Baked constantly are making bad decisions,
Right.
but you
Always.
love them more for it. Noah Baumbach's characters all making bad choices, you love them more for it. Adam Sandler making bad choices, you love them more for it. What we see the superhero films, we think, oh, core competency, that's what we're into. When we're 14, nothing wrong with being 14, by the way. I like
Yeah.
14-year-olds, and I made plenty of films with 14-year-olds. But we're into and we love vulnerability and imperfection.
That's right.
And I guess because I articulate that and can illustrate it, Patty Jenkins, Noah Baumbach, Jon Favreau, Tony Kaye, lots of big directors have hired me to do those sorts of movies because I guess I'm an empath.
I, I love that, and I think it's going to be why you're a hugely successful director in this next phase, because I feel like the best directors, the best filmmakers, are avid people watchers. I love to just sit and watch people. And I'm not shy either. If they do something strange, I ask why. Like, I'll be like, my man, what was that? Like, how are we feeling today? Why was that going on?
And
Because
and
you need to
and you've just
know.
illustrated the key part of the creative process, because you know what? They will try to explain and they will
Oh,
be lying unintentionally.
absolutely.
This is what narrative is. Narrative is the imposition of order on an essentially chaotic
Yes.
world.
Yes.
The order, we love the order not because it's true, because it's preferable to chaos. So
Right.
we'll accept order from wherever it's offered. Maybe it's the 3 act structure. Maybe we're a member of not just a legitimate religion, but some cult. There's plenty of them in California. Why
Right.
do people love cults? Why do people love conspiracy theories? Because it gives order to a chaotic world.
That's
And when
right.
people feel chaotic themselves or behaving, and you say, explain it, they will explain it, but generally they're full of it because they just want to make it seem logical. And very often we are just compulsive or impulsive, and there's no reason why we do things. And that's why, as filmmakers, we have to illustrate the chaotic nature of existence to
Yes.
show the genuineness and authenticity of character.
Yes. Oh, my goodness. We could just make t-shirts of everything you say. It's
I know,
fantastic.
right? Very
Like
quotable. You're very
literally.
quotable.
Yeah, it's just very quotable, and just the approach is incredible. I love when we meet people that think like we think. Cuz sometimes we'll be talking about it and people think we're nuts. And it's like,
Mhm.
"No, but trust me, this is." Like and it's amazing to see somebody have such success with the approach that you have and how you've been doing things. It's just, yeah, I love it. I love
I,
absolutely
it's
everything about this
interesting, and you
conversation.
say that. I'm always look. I'm a writer, and yet I rail against writing and narrative, which is odd. And the best thing I've written is the GRQ book. I'm very proud
Right.
of the screenplay and the film, and I want people to see my films. And I'm very proud of Dominion Last Call with John Malkovich. Very, John Malkovich famously came on the set the second day, and I said, "John, I'm so delighted you're here." And he said, I loved your script." And I said, "Well, John, thanks. I'm really appreciative." And we'd spoken for weeks before. And the first time he really expressed that, he goes, "But I've never seen so many words in one script before." And it's very interesting when you hear me advocating the visual and the enigmatic and so on, that I wrote a very, very talkative. Then when I wrote the novel, it's got all these little fragmentary elements in it. And again, the novel is the best thing I've written. So this journey of discovery, as artists, we're always changing. And the
Yes.
idea that we do the same thing all the time is stultifying, which is why I'm against all those writing books, because it's just a single orthodoxy and a single way of doing things. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with those books. Sometimes you should write a film that way, and sometimes you should do things entirely differently.
Oh, oh my goodness. I'm
T-
just
just so many t-shirts, guys. This
No,
is
yeah, it's
so
like too
many.
many. It's too many.
After I'm done like editing this interview, I'm gonna go back and listen to it 3 times just
Yeah,
so I
no
can continue
kidding.
to
No,
take
yeah,
notes,
yeah.
and like it's an amazing thing. Oh my goodness. Well, how we like, because we don't want to take up too much of your time, and so how we like to round out the interviews is by hitting you with some popcorn questions. Now these are some fun questions for the audience just to get to know you a little bit more and to just have a little fun towards the end, right? Just to have a little
right.
fun. So this first question, it's kind of wrote one down instead of our original one. Was there any films in the last 5 years that surprised you cinematically?
Mm,
Wow, I
it's a
wish
good
I had
one.
prepared for that. A lot of them have. I would say Poor Things was
Mm,
such a
Yeah.
surreal departure from conventional filmmaking, which should have failed but didn't,
that's what
because
Yes.
it
Justin
goes
said
to
too.
this idea that,
Yeah.
farce or surrealism takes
Hmm.
you out of object reality, and therefore you don't believe character. The Emma Stone portrayal is so odd and peculiar, you should have said, "This is absurd, this is a cartoon," and yet you felt an empathic bridge to that character from frame one. So I thought the film was brilliant, effective, powerful, and brilliant. Not a film. The other one I would mention it would be The Bear, which again
Yes.
Yes.
I like to eat, but I'm not into that whole foodie culture. But the way they create tension in that movie
Mm,
or that series by editing in particular, and then by the handheld camera and the tight compositions is brilliant. And I never thought I would see that in television. I thought that would be too risky for conservative network executives, but clearly not.
it- Yeah, the bear, like that the holiday, that Christmas family dinner scene. It's
Best
so
bit of
much
filmmaking I've seen.
composition, lighting, the aspects that they bring into that scene alone was just like, And then, like you said, there's a scene
What
between
sequence?
Bernthal and the I forget her name, but it's just the two of them, and it's like 10 straight minutes of dialogue, but the way it is shot, the way it
Yeah.
is lit, you are like you are in that room with them, feeling that entire conversation with them. Yeah, I love
Yeah.
that you brought that up.
Spot on.
Just
And
spot on.
I have, has there been better filmmaking anywhere than the Christmas episode in the last 5 years?
Oh,
I'm not sure. I
yeah,
just thought
agreed.
Agreed.
I just and Jamie Lee Curtis's performance,
Oh,
and the scene with the fork, throw it at me, throw
yes,
it at me,
yes,
and talk about the way you set a sequence up, because you as an audience don't know what he's going to do,
no,
but man, and they sustain it. It's, Hitchcock taught us it's not when the bomb goes off, it's the moment before the bomb goes off that the drama
yes,
is.
that's right.
So they really milked that moment before. Superb bit of editing, directing, performance.
Oh, I would agree wholeheartedly. And yeah, you're right. Film or television, I don't think we've seen anything that good in a really long time. It was just brilliant.
Utterly
I'm
agree.
curious because I love the way your mind is working so far. So this is going to be an interesting one. If
So
you
far.
could, yeah, if you could dive in and live inside a film or a television show, which one would it be and why?
Man, dudes, you're not asking easy questions. Like, hey, Stephen, your wonderful, well-reviewed book GRQ. Where is it available? On Amazon and all good bookstores. It's called
That's right.
GRQ. Get Rich Quick, published by Fly on the Wall Press. See, I'm buying time.
Yeah, no, uh
Um,
huh, uh huh.
I would say Love, actually, because
Oh,
Oof, yes.
it's not a heavy or significant film, but Richard Curtis is a hero of mine, not because he shows the world as it is, but how we all wish it to be.
mm,
I would
Mm.
love to think that love is transcendent, and that all we have to do is meet our the right appropriate life partner. The world will be transmogrified, and we and they will be happy forever. I'm not sure that's the way life is,
yeah,
but
yeah.
that doesn't mean I don't wish it to be. And if we can have Winnie the Pooh childlike fantasies, the adult fantasy would be the simplicity of the almost religious belief in love that that film portrays.
Mm,
The scene in Portugal is magnificent,
yeah.
Yes.
and who doesn't want a crowd when we're confessing to our future life partner that we love them, and to then be applauded. It's something he does a lot of in Notting Hill, of course.
Yep,
The
yep.
sequence at the end of that, where he does the same thing, but only because it gives us such visceral pleasure. Crowds don't always serve a narrative element, but we all want the accolades of a crowd, and we all want to be celebrated on an individual way. So I want the beauty and simplicity of the belief in love, and I want to inhabit that film so the world can be a better one that I myself
Ooh,
inhabit.
great answer.
So
Great answer.
just everything you have that you say is so good, so good. This
And I
one,
was really unprepared for that one, but you see, just the little buying of that time to
right?
That's
tawdry
right.
promotion of my book got let me develop, because I was searching in my head
Yeah,
while I was doing
Well,
exactly,
that.
that was a hell of a
exactly.
search because that was a great answer.
Listen, you said you love authenticity, so we love throwing it
That's
at you.
right.
That's for
That's right.
sure.
Keep it coming. Is there another? I'm ready.
Of course, we have three more, three more. This one's a little deep. The next two are a little deep. What was your biggest fear as a child, and then what is your biggest fear now?
Ooh. Um, my biggest fear as a child was incompetence. That
Mm,
I came from as a younger child in a super smart family,
Hmm.
and what psychologists would have subsequently told me, if I was receptive and able to understand, is that younger children always feel incompetent because you're younger and you haven't developed the ordinary skill sets that the older people have. Why there was a big gap between me and my older brothers and sisters, and as I said, my father was like a genius. My brother and sisters super smart, and so I felt kind of inadequate, and a little bit of dyslexia, not great at reading, wasn't doing great at school. I think everyone thought I was destined for certain failure. I wish I could say that's left me, but I still feel inadequate in many respects. I think the great seminal moment in my life was when I was shooting the action stuff on SWAT, and I'd gotten everything I wanted, particularly Logan as a cinematographer. 23 cameras. I had 9 Moscow lights. I was lighting all of East Los Angeles. We had a three-quarter size Learjet that we were going to crash on the Second Street Bridge on a 4-ton metal plate with an eyelet on it that we could pull the plane onto. Spark guns, 1,700 squibs, Samuel Jackson, Colin Farrell, things blowing up, three-quarter loads on these automatic weapons, a giant wet down with these wet down trucks, a crew, just my crew of 179 people, which I was command. Is that the dream? And yet I felt hugely depressed because the only one thing worse than not getting what you want is getting what you want and still having a sense of emptiness within.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, and that's literally when the phone call came from Clark Peterson in Florida saying, "We're doing this little movie. We're about to shut down because everything's going wrong. Could you fly to Florida and take the production over? We'll shut down and start again, and we can't pay you much. And there's this actress in it that you probably haven't heard of, and I hadn't heard of, and a first-time director. All the things you would never work with a first-time director, never work with an unheard of actors, and never take over a production that's already in trouble." And I left SWAT a couple of weeks early, and with my huge salary and all my lights and cameras, and I went and shot that little film in Florida, which was Monster, and won an Oscar.
There you.
So, and what that taught me was that we think that mammon and money and airplanes, which I bought one, honestly, in at a moment of madness, virtually bankrupted me.
Oh, go.
All the Los Angeles place where you go and you buy things you never wanted, and then take movies that you shouldn't do to pay for the things you never want.
Yep.
So, and I had no business. I did not have the sort of money that would be able to afford that thing, but it was an impulse, and then it was just paying for it all the time, and then later got rid of it. Glad I did it. Loved being a pilot, but man, it just emptied what little money that I had. But it was better than the depression that was always
Yeah.
circling me. So
Yeah.
that's very often when we buy things is because we're depressed. We think we can purchase our way out of depression. And what I discovered instead was that it is tragically about integrity. It really is about doing things that are important. It really is finding a purpose. It is about finding love. It is about being loved and loving in its turn. It is about sacrifice. It is about common human decency. It is about treating other people with respect. And it is giving back to others, as I try to do. It is all those things that sound like old-fashioned moralism, but after 3,000 years of civilization, a lot of people did figure it out. We just don't listen to them. And we think that the thing that's immediate and pleasurable, like the things we purchase, are the things that will give us a resonant and profound happiness. They don't. So then I began focusing more on my writing, more on helping others, more about working on quality projects. It brought me back to me being a writer again and trying to create movies that matter to people. And I'm still, periodically depressed. I still feel great sadness. I still fear free floating fear that comes from nowhere, unconnected to anything, big existential crises. But now at least I have the self therapy of writing and of creative expression, which to me has made my life better. So my current fear, I think, just running out of time before I have a chance to do the things that I want to do.
Well, first, the courage to express the vulnerability of still being depressed and still worrying about things. I think a lot of people don't have necessarily the courage to do that, even though that's what they're feeling. So thank you for feeling safe enough and courageous enough to express that vulnerability. We appreciate that. Two, incompetent is not a word I would have described. You are one of the most articulate, well spoken, well thought out guests we've ever had on the show. I think you're doing just fine in the intelligence factor. And then I think you've kind of answered their question about 15 times within that response. But for the next question, it was if you could go back and tell your younger self, say your 10-year-old self, your 12-year-old self something, what advice would you give him?
Oh, relax.
Yep.
It's life is going to happen. 90% of the things you worry about don't occur. Genuinely, statistically, don't occur. The best things that will happen in your life will come unannounced. You think that they will be heralded and announced, and they will be foreshadowings and garlands and cherubs singing as they enter through your door, that you have some new career or life opportunity. It doesn't happen that way.
That's right.
Bills happen every day. Disease and illness and the sickness of others happens every day.
Yes.
That's always with you. So you begin to think the world is that way. But then suddenly, you think from nowhere, you get offered Monster, you get offered No Baumbach movies, you get a chance to work with Ridley Scott or Tony Kaye or Jon Favreau, whatever it is, and no one tells you beforehand it's going to happen. It just happens because you put in the work. So, there's a thing from the biblical reference I'll make here, which is they also serve who stand and wait. And I would say that that is important, that the idea of just putting in the work every single day, making yourself better, improving your craft, right, improving yourself right every day, whether you're a writer or not, evolve as a person, and then seemingly magical, the opportunities will become manifest, but only because you're ready to engage when they come.
Yes. Man,
You're really leaving me speechless. Like, oh my goodness, I could not express that enough. Yeah. Fifth and final question, and then we'll get you out of here. I know,
after
right?
we pitch the book and the movie again.
Of course, of course.
Did we pitch the book? The book's called. Hang on, I have a few copies here.
There you go. Love it. Love it.
I don't want to seem too philosophic. I mean, I'm very proud of the book because, by the way, all these things we're talking about. This is exactly what the book's about. It's about finding purpose. It's about what happens when we behave immorally. It's about the importance of love. These things matter to me, and I know they seem kind of tacky, and there's sexier things in the world than moral anchor, but there's nothing more important.
That's right.
That's right. That's right. And fifth and final, are you happy with your career so far?
Whew, man, dude, some easier questions. Am I happy with my career? Am I happy with my life? I have made horrible and terrible errors in both. I've messed up things that matter to me by acts of madness and self-destruction.
Yeah.
I've screwed up relationships. I famously had a director who went on to win an Oscar with his next movie. I got upset with him on set because he treated a PA badly. So I jumped to the defense of the PA, told him what I thought of him, and then a month later he was directing one of the most famous films of all time. I'd done 5 films with the BBC. So that was probably a mistake. The music video days, I was wild and dangerous and hurt a lot of people I shouldn't have hurt. I could have been a better father to my beloved son. A good father, but I could have been better. I went away too often on film shoots. I was away in India for a year. I was in China and everything else while he was growing up. You don't get to see your child grow up again. So I've made so many. I took radical choices in some photography that I probably shouldn't have done. But where I've arrived, my understanding, and all joking aside about the book, I could not. I said to my wife the other day, I wish I had written this book when I was 20. And she said wisely, you couldn't have written the book when you were 20. All the bad experiences I've had over the last 40 years, the accumulation of those bad experiences gave me some small measure of wisdom so I could put it in a book and have something to say. So when I look back on all these things and say, has my career been good or bad? It was the career I had to have to become the person I am. So I don't know whether it's good or bad, but it was essential to making me the person I've evolved into at this moment.
Can't end it any better than that, any more powerful than that. And again, the vulnerability and the courage to say that. A lot of people won't say, yeah, I messed up a lot of things. I blew a lot of relationships. I did a lot of... Well, you did. And like you said, I think everything that happens for a reason. It is the reason you are the person that you are and the filmmaker that you are, the writer that you are. And so why not be courageous enough to say, yeah, I ain't perfect. I've made a lot of mistakes and here I am still chugging. So, I love that. I love that. Thank you so much, man. This has just been a really outstanding conversation. I'm not even going to call it an interview because that is a conversation right there. That is something that is going to make people think when they listen to it and maybe even take a good hard look at their own life and go, wait a minute, maybe I'm approaching this thing all wrong. We really appreciate when we have conversations like this. We really do.
You guys are very flattering. I'm very, very grateful to you both. No, it was fun to talk about. Look, this is art too. The more you talk about yourself and your feelings, and the more we share them with each other, this is what film does. This is what writing does.
That's
This
right.
is what we do in our art and craft and connecting with each other. Which is why, if two of us were AI, this would be meaningless because we're not interested in what AI has to say. Yeah, it can imitate the human experience, but it can't have the human experience.
That's
And
right.
as I speak to you, I'm speaking to human beings and full of vulnerabilities and I presume imperfections like me. And that's what connects us ultimately. And that's what makes the world significant and profound for us as sentient human beings, right?
Yes.
Most definitely, most definitely. Promote everything one more time, and where can people follow you? Because it's all about social media.
Me promote? I can't imagine. I can't. Oh, the book, and this is Gail Ann Hurd, who produced a film called Terminator and
Yes.
another film called Aliens. She calls it, this very rarely have I come across a book as thoroughly engaging. And the book's called GRQ. This is all the profound stuff I said before. Now I become tawdry, but you can cut that out if you want, Logan. But there is the book. The film's called GRQ, coincidentally, also based on the book. That comes out early next year, spring of next year, in cinemas first, and then on streaming services. I've got a Instagram page, and I it's free. It's called Steve Bernstein, director writer, and I talk like I'm talking to you guys now, at least once or twice a week, and then I curate stuff that I think is of interest to filmmakers, to artists, thinkers, writers, actors every day.
Fantastic.
So I that's my giving back. And then there we've got a podcast, not rivals of yours, but an adjunct to yours, called Filmmaker and
Yeah.
Fans. I do that with Vince Grimes, the former creative director at Google,
Mm.
and we do that once a week, and we talk about big ideas about the creative process of filmmaking. So those are all the things I'm doing, but going to this principle of my obligations to give back to others, and if something good comes of it, that's great, but it doesn't have to be good for me as long as it's good for somebody.
Oh my
Thank
goodness.
you. Thank
Okay.
you. Thank
Yes.
you. Yeah.
Yes. Just
Yeah.
thank you so much for your time today. We cannot say that enough. And I'm hoping that we can talk to you again
Of
soon.
course.
Maybe even, like I said, we're up and coming filmmakers ourselves. Send our stuff. Maybe you could see it, give your notes, whatever.
Well,
Just,
that's the next. That's a genuine offer, on camera, off camera. If you guys are about to do a film, and it's presumptuous because we all have our own creative visions. No
yeah.
vision's better than another. It's just different.
Mm-hmm.
But if you run into an obstacle or a roadblock, to do with anything with your upcoming film, give us a shout. I'm a limitless resource, and if I can't get back to you within an hour or so, someone will track me down and say, "Hey, those guys from Crazy Ant just phoned. I'll get right to you and help you out." All
We
right.
might absolutely do that. Like I was just about to say, I can't think of a better guest to have had right before we go into production and shooting this thing because it's
Yeah.
been so inspiring and to hear your approach, right? And so I can't wait to direct. I can't wait to see Logan shoot it. We're finalizing different shots and storyboards right now and colors. We're working colors. This thing takes place at night in a dark, dreary spot with a thunderstorm happening, and so it's really we're relying heavily on lighting and
Yeah.
composition to
And
make this thing work. So you might get
so
that
with
phone call.
night stuff, remember overlight and print down. You don't shoot it dark because you can't print up. You start losing detail. So overprint, a lot of backlight, and remember because of the fovea centralis, the way the eye works, blue is the same thing as dark.
Hmm.
So if you light it blue, it'll seem dark to an audience, even though it isn't, because the fovea centralis stops working at low light levels. Only
Mm-hmm.
the rods work, the cones don't. So
Yep.
you see things at night as blue, even when they're not. So all that's why they used to do day for night in blue. And overshoot and never raise your voice. And remember, the last day of production is one of the day after the last day of production, one of the saddest days you'll ever experience
Yes.
because you'll never repeat those relationships. And the most important advice, keep a diary of everything that you're doing and experiencing because it is such a profound thing when you're in that crucible of production. And keep a video diary. You won't want to do it because you'll be focused on other things. But when you look back on those things later, you learn so much by watching you do the work.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Yes.
Goodness
All
gracious.
great
We
advice. All
yeah,
great
we could
advice.
talk to you for hours. We don't want to.
Okay.
Oh my goodness. But
Uh,
thank you again so much. Take
my
care, and we'll
pleasure.
be talking to you soon.
Best of luck, lads. Speak to you soon.
Thank
Bye
you.
bye.
Thank you now.
Bye.
Oh my goodness. That wow. Wow. I have no words. I really was speechless.
I would agree with you. I hope that everybody will take the time to listen to this conversation, and you will learn how to be a better writer, a better cinematographer, a better filmmaker, but most importantly, a better human being. This is a conversation that shouldn't be missed, and yeah, man, just what an incredible conversation.
Yes, most definitely. Thank you again, Steven. Thank you for coming on the show.